Hi, everyone. I'm Mark C. Crowley, and I am the author of Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. Today on the show, we're going to talk about a potential recession and why it would be an absolute disaster for managers to seize back power that they perceive to have lost during this past 2 years. We're going to talk about the science on why people need to marinate in positive emotions in order to excel at work. And I'm going to share the most inspiring thing you can say to people who work for you, even when we are potentially on the brink of a recession. So we're going to do that and a whole lot more. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our delicious conversation with Mark Crowley. This is part two of our episodes with Mark. He is the author of Lead from the Heart, Transformational Leadership for the 21st Century. His mission is to fundamentally change how we lead people in the workplaces around the globe. The guy has been featured in everything from Fast Company magazine, Forbes, all the way through to his work being taught in educational PhD programs at the University of Massachusetts. He's taught at the University of Iowa's MBA program. His stuff is there. And he has a podcast by the same name, The Heart of Leadership. Lead from the Heart, rather. Lead from the Heart is his podcast, and that has an audience in 163 countries. He has a massive following on Twitter. Very influential guy. In part one, we talked a little bit about this leading from the heart, what it really means and what it doesn't mean, and this suspicion that it's going to be all woo-woo and soft skills, and we've really undervalued all that stuff. And his work and his research, along with the research of the HeartMath Institute, has really shown how really getting the optimal out of people is actually a heart-centered basis, and that we've been really working out of an old paradigm, and that old paradigm is that the brain is the most important thing. But Mark and I touched on that there is an intellect in the heart, and I really want to get you to understand that. So first of all, we think about neurons as being in the brain, but you actually have neurons in many places, but the three major places are in your brain, in your heart, and in your gut, and they all communicate with each other. But here's the thing, there is no precognitive process, there is no prefrontal cortex to the gut or to the heart. It's very knowing. It doesn't overthink it. And if you've ever had one of those cycles where you're thinking something to death, but that's the prefrontal cortex. That's you overthinking a process, whereas your heart just knows. And that. We even use that language. Why did you make the decision? It was just in my heart. I knew it was right. And, and we'll all say, I didn't follow my heart instinct. I didn't follow what I knew. And that's how it ended up being a shit show. Well, this is exactly what we're talking about. The only distinction is that it's how you get the optimal out of people. So in the first part, we talked about that. We talked about the misunderstandings of it. We talked about why it's important to nurture your people, to give them this sense that they are valued, and to give people what it is they need that they actually don't even know they need, why this is so important. In part two of the show, we want to look at the application of that. And we want to look at the application of it, particularly in a post-pandemic world where I think it's close to 100 million Americans have quit their jobs. And that, by the way, the Great Resignation is not limited to the US. If you've been reading my stuff, you know that I wrote about it at the end of the pandemic when I said that the Great Resignation is global. There were people resigning from work in Vietnam, which is not a first world country. It's a country where you have to go to work. They were doing it in China, right? It's the Communist Party. People were walking away saying, I've had enough. I'm going back to the village. Even with not having anything, they walked away. Great Resignation. There were people who couldn't resign, and they just didn't have the money to do that. They didn't have the support to do that, didn't have a way to do that. And they went to quiet quitting. What did that mean? It means basically I will be totally unengaged. Business was very slow to understand how to respond to that. And now we've come into this next phase, which is now there's a potential for a global recession, might be the word. It might be another word that's stronger. Talk to us about leading from the heart with all those considerations, Mark. That's a lot of things going on.
There's a lot of things going on. I want to, I said at the beginning that we're brothers from different mothers, and you mentioned Antonio Damasio, and I can see like out my window the Salk Institute in La Jolla, California, where he wrote the book, which is cleverly called Descartes' Error.
Yes.
So that, I just find that amazing that you would know that. But he was one of the very first persons to say that Descartes was wrong.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I want to point out is just before we get into what you just set up, is that there are going to be people listening to this that are still going to be unpersuaded.
Of course.
But the science, if you take the woo-woo-ness out of the idea of the heart, and you just think of it from a Salk Institute scientist saying that you're not the rational person you think you are, that you're making your decisions emotionally, and then your mind is rationalizing it to make the decision that fits into that. That's how people operate. So how we make people feel at work is really the driver of whether or not they're going to be committed or not. So I say that as a setup to, so we had people heading into COVID, people were already miserable. We already had really low engagement and job satisfaction. And by the way, people had begun quitting jobs before COVID, but then COVID hit, nobody was quitting anything. People were working from home, and it was like, we don't know how long this thing is going to last. And it was all sort of dust in the air. But when the dust started settling, people started to have, and I know you know this, we've talked about this, that people had the same exact epiphany all over the world, which is like, am I happy at work? Am I happy working for this boss? Am I happy working for this organization? Am I getting my needs met? And the answers were repeatedly, no, 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 no. And a lot of it was, especially my boss, like, this person does not care about me, and I'm not going to put up with this anymore, because COVID sort of put the vice grips around us to say life is really short, and am I going to put up with this? So that's led to nearly 100 million people since January of 2021 to the end of 2022. Almost 100 million people quitting their jobs. That's an astonishing thing. When we just sort of go, oh, it's just a record 4 million people a month. No, this is like disruptive. When people leave their jobs, they're leaving their friends, they're leaving their routines, they're leaving their knowledge of an organization. That's destabilizing, but people are
massively
choosing to do it, right?
Yeah, and let's just address that for a minute, because 100 million people, that's a third of the US population. And the population includes children. So it's more than a third of the workforce. It's a massive amount of the workforce. That's number one. As you've heard me say before on this show and in my writings, the COVID was the great pause in meaning, because we were all running on that stupid treadmill of living the life of hustle, where Gary Vaynerchuk was the high priest, and we all went to that church every day, and we worked our asses off. And then we had the thoughts of this is not working, but we couldn't get off the treadmill.
Right.
COVID gave us that pause. It gave us the pause in meaning. What is the meaning of my life? Why am I doing this shit? What's it really all about? And as you said, it was like a global wave of like, duh, what am I doing?
Yeah. So if we all have the same epiphany and it's leading people out, so then you have two responses. So if I'm a CEO, I can say, screw these people who are quitting, they weren't good people, sour grapes, that kind of a thing. Or you could say, we need to start to evaluate why people are leaving. And interestingly, there's a lot of research that shows a lot of managers made the first choice. That they resented the fact that people wanted to continue working from home. They wanted to get them back. They were trying to demand them. They weren't used to having employees have so much power. So now we head into, this is the end of 2022. This will be heard in January. By January, just because everybody keeps predicting it, we'll probably be in the beginning stages of some sort of a recession. Mm-hmm. And from my point of view, the biggest mistake a CEO can make is to just go on the whiteboard and say, okay, we have a recession coming. What do we do, guys? Lay off people. Let's lay off people. That's what we should do. We lay off 4,000 people. We can save $10 million. It'll keep our stock price up. And what they don't understand is that people aren't the same. So if you lay them off, they will never come back to your organization. They will never forgive you, but neither will the people that stay.
That's the point I just want everybody to get. You have to pause and understand that. You may go, well, it's justified. I got to let people go. All right, let's just say that that's true. Now you have to realize that there is an impact on the people who are left behind. You've just told them you're next on the chopping block at any moment. The loyal people who were with us for 10 years have already gone, and you think you're safe? Yeah. So now everybody's on that edge. There's no sense of being nurtured there. Keep going, Mark.
Exactly. So if feelings and emotions drive behavior, what feelings and emotions have you just created for people? You have undermined the most important, other than food, water, and shelter, safety. Psychological and emotional safety is our highest need. So now what you said is, hey, if things get worse, Dov, you're next.
Yep.
And by the way, I liked, people that were let go. And so now you've disrupted my sense of family. You've disconnected my sense of trust in you and your organization. And so people say, well, only non-publicly traded companies would make the decision to not lay people off. And there's evidence of that. Bob Chapman didn't lay off people at his organization. Barry Waymiller, Jim Goodnight at SAS never laid off anybody, but these are privately held organizations. And so people would argue, well, that they could do that, but they're the owners of the company and it's their money, no different than a shareholder. So no. I'm not convinced that that's true, but you can, and Apple is starting to do this where they're not replacing people. They're anticipating if we have a slowdown. Bank of America, Moynihan came out just recently and said, we're not going to lay anybody off. What we're going to do is we have 215,000 people in our company, 10% annual turnover guaranteed. That's 21,000 people that would be let go without me firing, terminating, ending the careers of anyone. This is the way they should be thinking if you're concerned about how people are going to be feeling, because it's easy to pull the switch and just lay people off and just, be done with it and move on. But the harm is what most managers don't understand, is the legacy of those layoffs is so deep in people that the minute the economy turns around, which inevitably will, they're not going to be loyal. They're not going to stick around because they will never forget the choice that you made. And what I talked to Jim Goodnight a couple of times about this at SAS, and what he said was he told his people during the Great Recession, I'm not laying anybody off. I'm asking you to do two things: watch your spending and innovate. And so people feeling completely safe, like I'm going to the eye of the needle. The Great Recession is here, and all the peers, all these companies are laying off like up to 10,000 people. And my CEO says to me, you're not going to lose your job, just do good work. It's reciprocal. So what happens is that when you feel, so I work for you, Dov, and I'm feeling this guy just said to me, I'm not going to lose my job. I value you more than that. I want you to innovate. So when we come out at the other end of this, we have products to sell. I'm like, I am going to innovate like you've never seen. This is how human beings are wired. We will give back to you instinctively. And we will also give back to you instinctively if you take from us. That's human nature. So if you harm me through layoffs, if you harm the company through layoffs, and you think this is just an easy solution to get your balance sheet back where it is, you get your income statement where it is, so shareholders can applaud you and keep the stock price up, you're missing the boat here. You're missing the plot, as they say in Great Britain.
Yeah, you definitely lost the plot. Absolutely. So let's talk directly to it for a minute. So for the leader who's watching, listening to us, who says, but I don't have a choice. We've got to lay off. We're not a Fortune 100, but we're big enough that we're maybe a Fortune 500, and we're big enough. We got a lot of people, and we just can't weather it. How do we do it? How do we do this with heart, Mark? What do we do? How do we give us some guidance around this? Because it just feels like we've got to get rid of some people, and we don't know what to do because we can't afford to keep everybody on.
So there's a couple things. One is I would go to your employees and say, we have this challenge. Help us solve this challenge. They will come up with ways to save money that could be an offset to people. Obviously employees are your number one expense. So if you lop off, you axe 1,000 people, well, you've saved a huge expense. Benefits, right. All of it, right? So that's such an easy thing. Let's just do it. But if you go to their employees, they might say, well, there are things that we spend money on here that we can stop spending money on that could be the equivalent of those 1,000 people. So you might get ideas, but not only that, but you're engaging people in a way they're like, we want to help you. Like yes. You're coming at it from help us so that we don't have to let anybody go. I'm going to come up with some really good ideas to keep my job. So that's one. But Bob Chapman at Barry Waymiller, who's the CEO, who wrote a book called Everybody Matters, he and I were just having this conversation the other day. And what he did during the Great Recession was different than Jim Goodnight. He went to his people and said, we know that things are we've already started to see sales volumes are down, revenue is going to be down. So we have a challenge, we have a problem. Would you be willing to take a month unpaid, everyone in the company, as an alternative to laying people off? And everybody raised their hand and said, I'm willing to do it. They didn't have dissenters, right? They simply didn't have dissenters. The other thing that I would say is there's studies that I'm seeing, and you've probably seen them too, where it says 98% of CEOs predict a recession. We're not in a recession yet. We're not in a recession. No. So when you say to the CEO or the senior managers and say, well, we have to let people go, we can't follow that advice. I'm saying, no, put a hiring freeze on right now. Go out to your people and say, in the event that we hit a recession, if in fact it happens, because we're dealing with fiction right now. Now, we may be good at predicting, but it's not here yet. So you can take steps now, engaging people, telling them we're trying to do everything we can. We're having a hiring freeze. We're only going to be replacing certain positions. We're doing this to protect our team because we love our team. I'm telling you, it's a totally different response from people than to say, well, of course, if you were in our position, you would understand why we have to let people go.
And you've made my point exactly, which I think is beautiful. Thank you. Which is that we say it's inevitable because we haven't thought of any other way. And the answer to that is, we saw that in 2008 with the recession, and everybody was freaking out about all kinds of things. And some of us are old enough to remember that very clearly. But, let's also remember that there were companies who went to their, I worked with some of these companies. They went to their teams and they said, listen, we don't want to let anybody go. We care about everybody. We realize you've got families and we're responsible. And we want to make a difference. Here's what we're asking. Are you willing to take a 20% cut across the board, everybody, for a period of time, which we'll renew every year and we'll check every year, right? But for a year minimum, 20% cut. Or you can go down to 4 days a week at full pay. Those are your two choices, so we don't have to lay anybody off. Not one of the companies that I worked with, not one of them got anybody who said no. Right? Everyone went, yes, sure, absolutely. Because they wanted to take care of themselves. They wanted to be all right. And they all went, well, a 20% cut is better than being unemployed. A 4 days a week is, and then this was again the beginning of people going, oh yeah, I actually want to work 4 days a week. I don't want to work 5.5 days a week.
You get these surprise outcomes.
You actually, this is what I wanted. Right. So this is why I think this is the problem, is that we get to an either or rather than an end. And we've got to get to an end. And once we get to that end, things start to open up. People start to be innovative. And then the other piece she said, which I think is vitally important for us to pay attention to, which is, what I work with clients on around it is something called consequential thinking. Consequential thinking is you will do something and there will be a result. Okay. Yeah, well, I'll lay people off and it'll be shitty, and I'll feel terrible, but we'll save the company. Hold on. Consequential thinking is exactly what Mark was saying. The consequence is not now. It's the ripples on the pond 5 years later. It's when nobody wants to work for you because you were shitty and you laid everybody off. Whereas that company, they didn't pay as well, but they didn't lay everybody off. You know what? I'd rather work for somebody for a little bit less who I think cares about me. I believe who shows that they care about me. That is now, that's the leverage point. Do you give a shit? That's the leverage point.
It is the leverage point. It's interesting. Early in my career, I worked for a financial institution. It was a bank, and it was thriving. It was coming out of the recession, and then all of a sudden, it's just killing it, just doing great. And then they made some very stupid decisions, and almost overnight, it went from thriving to like, we're on our knees here, and we may not survive.
Wow.
And so I went to this meeting. This guy was running, the retail bank branches where you get mortgages and checking accounts and stuff. So he ran the whole network.
Wow.
And he brought us all together. And he goes, listen, and this is like a Get Smart reference to an American television show from 50 years ago. He goes, I need to bring you into the cone of silence. And what I mean by that is what I'm going to share with you, I'm not supposed to share with you, but I think it's information you need. We are in a very big problem right now. We have great difficulty, and I need you to know that because I need you to support me. I need you to support and do everything that you can to make this organization succeed. What I want you to know is that the two things, like, it affected me so deeply, I've never forgotten it on two levels. One was the trust. I'm telling you something I probably shouldn't, but I need to tell you because it will help you do better.
Yes.
The other was, I need your help.
Mm-hmm.
There wasn't anybody in that room that didn't walk out. Like, we were looking at our careers potentially ending, and they did, by the way. The bank ended up failing 18 months later. But at this moment, we didn't know that. And He inspired people like you wouldn't believe. People were like, I'll go to the mat for that guy to help this company survive. And people did, based on the trust and the inspiration of help me. I'm not going to make these top-down decisions. I want you involved. And people came up with incredible, options. So what I'm proposing isn't something I haven't seen before.
That's really great. You and I as speakers, we get out on the stages and people say, will my people be inspired? Right. And of course we want to inspire people, of course, in spiritus. We want to remind them of that. But I always say my job is certainly not to motivate. I don't give a shit about motivation. Motivation is like a suntan. It will wear off quick. I want to inspire them to a place in their soul. But if you want to inspire them, I'm going to tell you the most important words you'll ever use. And they're like, what is it? And it's exactly what you just said. I need your help. The most inspiring thing as a human being.
Is that when so he said that, I need your help. Where do you experience it? Are you experiencing that here, or are you experiencing it here? Like, I felt it there, and I'm sure you did, right?
Yep.
That was sort of like, I'm 23 years old, 24 years old, and I'm having this experience. And long before any of this work, I'm like, wait a minute, like, that's where you inspire people. You don't inspire people in their head. You inspire people here. And
you have to think about who would go to fight for you. Who would go to, I talk about this all the time with people. I talk about, you got to know the hill you're willing to die on, but you've also got to know the hill other people are willing to die on. And the hill they'll die on, most people, outside of your sociopaths, most people will die on the hill of helping you. They will do whatever they can to help you as long as they know you give a shit about them. So it's not just help me. It's like, I really care about you and I need your help. That combination, you can't say I need your help and not give a shit about them, because they're like, well, screw you. Right?
Yeah,
You've got to
people
have
can
both.
feel, authenticity of that, right?
Of course.
The minute I think you're a bullshitter, it's even worse. So
Right.
don't say anything you don't mean, because if you say something and I can feel that you're like lying to me or you don't really mean it, then I think less of you than I did prior to you ever saying it.
Right. But that key is understanding that. So when we talk about this power shift of the team, the talent had all the power, and now there's this feeling like, oh, finally, we've got the power back with the employees. We got the power, because now with the recession, they'll have to come to us and they'll have to accept lower pays and all the rest of it. What's your caution to these folks? Because I know there's some of those leaders who are like, finally.
God bless you for asking that question. Stop thinking about it being this teeter-totter of power. Distribute power. It's no longer this top-down kind of a thing, management against employees. If you look at it as they have power, we have power, let's use the power together. I know that's somebody's going to go, oh, that's kumbaya, that's ridiculous. But if you respect what people are looking for in their work experience and you match them and try to support that, then they will match you and support you in the initiatives that you have and the goals you're trying to achieve and the innovation you're trying to create, all of it. So this idea, and I see this in the media all the time, and it really literally pisses me off, because it's like, oh, managers think they're going to get the power back and they're going to be able to make people come back to the office and they're going to use the recession as an experience to justify it. And I'm like, yeah, if they do, they're just blowing it. They missed the whole meeting here. They missed completely what's going on here. People want to feel valued. They want to feel mattered. They want to have a voice. And if you give that to them and you do it legitimately, it elevates your power. It doesn't take your power away. And this is the myth that people have.
So it's really interesting, because when you talk about distributing that power and understanding that power, actually, very recently I interviewed Jackie Ferguson, who is from the Inclusion Institute. She wrote the Inclusive Language Handbook. And one of the things I talked to her about is that, it's lovely to have these ideas of inclusion and including people of gender and of race and all the rest of it. And I go, well, what about inclusion of human beings, right? And the inclusion of human beings is suddenly like, well, what if I step off the hierarchy of power and I include you in the power? What if that's what you're talking about here, is that this, like, let's collaborate. I in my book, Fiercely Loyal, that I wrote in 2015, I wrote about the 5 C's. And one of those C's was, let's not compete. The best companies are no longer interested in competing. They're interested in collaborating.
Right.
All right. And you need to collaborate with the people you think are your competition, because you collaborate for the purpose of servicing your people. But now you think about your people. How did they collaborate? Or have they got to jump through the right hoops, talk to the right people to get permission to talk to the next person, and then everything gets watered down and they get, no. Collaboration on power, which is what you're talking about, is so, like, I think that's probably mind-boggling for some people, that idea. But if you don't do that, if you don't understand that we've all heard the analogy that if you really want to understand customer service, then talk to the frontline people. Yeah, everybody understands that. Nobody does it. But what if you did? What if you actually collaborated at that base level with everybody? You're like, okay, so Charlie, you're at the front desk here, and you're faced with this problem of that we're going to be faced with this financial downturn or whatever it is. How do you deal with it? Well, I don't know, boss. Well, if you had to go away and you had to think about it, what would you say? What would you imagine? How would you come back to it? I need your help. I think Charlie would help you. I think Charlie would come back to you and say, okay, well, I don't know, but. And it's that I don't know, but is where we get genius.
Yeah, because you're honoring people, but in order to become this kind of a leader, by the way, I read something just recently that was totally accurate. And they implied that our thinking around how to manage a business originated at the same time that slavery did. And so that's right. I have the power, you don't have the power. And now all of a sudden I'm feeling really vulnerable because these slaves of ours have suddenly—
the slaves are about to revolt.
They're right, and I need to reel them in and bring them back into the office. And that's our mentality. So we have to, that's pretty astute. So I'm thinking, all right, so first step is you're going to have to divorce yourself from that. You're going to have to realize that 175 years later, it's a different world and people are different and people really do have higher expectations. And they're certainly not going to work for a slave driver or a slave owner in the metaphorical way. But the other thing that I think has to happen is you got to get secure in yourself as a manager.
Yes.
You're not threatened by other people having a say, having a voice, having influence, getting approval, getting recognition that's separate from yours. One of the big complaints, this has been repeatedly shown in Gallup, if you look at why people are unhappy in their jobs, when they're unhappy, number 2 on the list is my boss competes with me. And so the minute you have a boss, so the mindset that I advocate for is that we actually obliterate the word manager and change it to coach. Mm-hmm. Coaches still hire, they still have financial responsibility, they still have goals, they're supposed to win, all of that. But the orientation is I don't compete with you. Like, you're my player. I'm going to try to make you the best so that when you get out on the court or in the field, you're going to perform to your best. Mm-hmm. I don't go, hey, Dov, we're down by 10 points and there's only 5 minutes left. So I'm taking you out and I'm putting myself in. You don't do that, right? No. In any sport. And that's what people feel is like, wait a minute, that right before the big project is going to be delivered, the manager comes in and says, oh, I'll take it to my boss now. And he's done nothing on it for a year. And now all of a sudden he wants to go in and get all the credit. People resent that, but they resent it because it's so unfair. It's so uncaring, right? And who wouldn't?
Yeah,
so
of course.
You got to get yourself secure enough to be able to say, you know what, Dov, it's okay if you succeed and it's okay if I succeed and we can succeed together and I'm not taking anything from you. Your success doesn't undermine my success in any way, shape, or form. And as a leader, you're actually elevating it, because if you're on my team and you're performing well and I have a team of people like you that are performing well, people are going to go, that guy's a good manager. We should give him or her more responsibility. We don't go, well, it appears that he happens to have really good, talented people, so we need to take the talented people and promote them. That's not the way the world works, right? But our fear is, if I help Dov's going to get all the love. He's going to get all the promotions. He's going to take my job. He's going to get my bonuses. And so hell no, am I going to help Dov? And when you have that mindset, it's a failed mindset.
Yeah, you're dead in the water. You're dead in the water. Mark, we're already at the end of part 2 of the show. It's been awesome having you on the show, mate. I would really love for you to tell people where they can find out more about you and about your book and all that stuff. But before we do, give us, particularly for those who are still wavering and going, yeah, I still think it's a bit woo-woo. Give us one practicality for the stiff leader who is probably still a little old school. What's the one practical thing they can go out and do now within the next 5 minutes, or within the first 5 minutes that they're in the office or around the work again?
So if you go up to the average manager and you say, Dov, you're an average manager. We're going to use you as an example. Do you think recognition is important to people? You're going to go, of course it is. It's like everybody knows that that's one of the most important things. So then I go to Dov's employees and I say, hey, how often do you get recognized? I haven't heard from my boss in weeks. I, just did 2 great projects, nothing. No. So there's this massive gap. So kind of like you did with the exercise with the heart earlier.
Yeah.
I would suggest is if you just want to test this, if you just want to see the credibility of this. So I believe unless, you take it to ridiculous saccharine excess, you cannot over appreciate people. So if you come to me at 10 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, Mark, it's the 15th of December, and I just want you to know that we hit our annual goal and my team busted their ass for you. We knew you were going on a holiday. We really wanted to get this to you for, I'm looking at you and I'm like, Dov, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank your team. I want to make sure I get out there and thank them, but I just want you to know how deeply appreciative I am. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I had assigned you a project 3 weeks ago. And you come in and you say, hey, I'm trying to get everything done. I'm going on vacation. You're going on vacation. I just want you to know I got the project done. So you hand me the project and I'm looking at it and I'm like, Dov, this is just brilliant. Like, this is like, I'm thinking this is exactly what I need. Now I can give it to my boss in advance. This is like wonderful. We have this belief that when I'm going to thank you a second time, it's like I'm going into my wallet. It's like going to cost me something. So I think, well, I already thanked Dov for hitting the annual goal. So he already knows that I'm happy with him. So I go, oh, good job on the project. Thanks a lot. Have a great Christmas. Well, that person is like, wait a minute, these are 2 separate events here. And so you're choosing not to thank me for doing something exceptional. So first of all, I believe what you recognize and appreciate openly, you'll get more of. So it's a criminal act, managerial malpractice to not acknowledge the second example, right? To not say, this is another thing you've done today. This is fantastic. And God, I can't believe it. And thank you. This is so wonderful. So try that. Just go back and if anything somebody does to you, you come in and there's a cup of coffee waiting from you. Your assistant said, I picked one up at Starbucks and I got one for you. That is incredibly thoughtful. Express what the real appreciation is. Don't just say thank you. But don't tell anybody what you're doing. Just go out of your way to express gratitude to people and just see you're going to see their physicality change in an instant. You're going to see it in their face. It's going to be red because they're so grateful to be appreciated, which is the irony of it, right?
Yes.
But just do that. And just do it for a few days and just see the reaction. Just don't miss any opportunity. Even if you say, well, I thanked them earlier for this and I thanked them earlier for that. Just, if you feel like you've done too much, just say, hey, thanks again. This is awesome. Great. Thank you. And just see what people do and see what their behavior is. Just start there.
Yeah, I think that's great. Just simply pay attention to what happens when you recognize people. It's magnificent. Mark, again, thank you, sir. We sincerely appreciate it. Please tell our viewers, our listeners, where they can find out more about you, your book, and all the wonderful resources that you have including your podcast.
Thank you. The book you can find on Amazon.com. It's called Lead from the Heart. I'm Mark C. Crowley, and my website is markccrowley.com. Don't forget the middle C. And it'll take you to my Twitter, my podcast, LinkedIn, all of those kinds of things. So one address, markccrowley.com, takes you everywhere.
Wonderful. And again, we'll make sure that everything is posted in the show notes. We want to thank you for being with us, Mark. It's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you for the delicious conversation. And for you, dear listener, remember, those who control the meaning of the tribe also control the movement of that tribe. Business and political leaders committed to positively shaping the political and business landscape know that we have to tap into what drives human emotion because it's what drives human behavior. And I am Dov Baron. I show businesses, leaders, and teams how to harness their emotional source code to move their tribe, because unified, actualized meaning is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness for all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about how the heart impacts your leadership and how you may have written off something as woo-woo that is actually the most profoundly powerful way to optimize your people, your team, and your business. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deepest meaning to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.